Why should you be encouraged to draft Rashaad Penny? Why should you be wary of drafting Dak Prescott? My guest, John Paulsen from 4for4 Fantasy, will tell you that and a whole lot more coming up on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the good folks from Circa and Fantrax. I'm Jeff Erickson, and my guest today is John Paulsen from 4for4 Fantasy Football. John is one of the stalwarts in the industry, has been a fantastic ranker for years, a good columnist. I'm also now in the same Scott Fishbowl League with him. We did the In and Out League at the Scott Fishbowl Live a couple of weeks ago. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. It was good to meet you there, and a longtime fan. And yes, every time I hear the In and Out, I want to do the In and Out chant that we were doing at Scott Fishbowl LA event there over at Trophy Smack. That was a good time.
Yeah, and Trophy Smack, man, what a great place to have a draft. Great people there too. Really fun time. I can't believe I missed out on it last year. I got like after the fact FOMO after being there this year. I was like, wow, I really missed out.
Yeah, they did a great job. I mean, they did 4 drafts last year and 4 drafts this year. They stepped it up a notch this year with more space. They didn't force all the games down our throats like they did last year. It was kind of hard. It was kind of chaotic trying to get the games done, but a lot of fun. They're great folks over there.
They are. So we got a lot to talk about. We are going to hit John's annual 99 stats that you need to know to help you draft. But before we do that, we got some news items. Top on our list has to be Cooper Kupp and that hamstring injury. Left practice yesterday. It seems like he's going to miss at least a couple of weeks with that. What's your level of concern with Cooper Kupp?
I would say mild. He's not a really young player, so anytime soft tissue injuries start to pop up in these older players or mid-range, mid-old players, you start to get a little bit concerned. But there's enough time for him to heal and be ready to go week 1, depending on the nature of this hamstring injury. I did see a few different tweets come through my feed about, possible recurrence of injury and how players of his age, it's like double the recurrence. So it's something to monitor. I did downgrade him a little bit in the projection, but he's still right now my fantasy wide receiver 2. You're looking at these other guys in the top 4 or 5. Jamar Chase has a Joe Burrow situation.
Right.
Tyreek Hill. I still think that there's something legally that might happen to him with the slap or whatever happened at the marina. And he's got a history of off the field issues. So he might miss a couple games or 4 games potentially if they decide to suspend him. So this group is getting a little dicey. And so, Justin Jefferson looks all the much better as my wide receiver 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I did look at your rankings right before coming on. I still saw Kupp there at 2. I was like, okay, we'll see what happens with that. And obviously, we got time. One of the problems we're going to have in trying to evaluate Kupp status is the Rams typically hold out their stars in preseason games. And I don't see that being any different this year with Stafford and Kupp.
Yeah, and I did downgrade his projections, but he was far enough ahead of Jamar Chase for me, given what's going on in Cincinnati. And I don't like, these are my opinions. This is how I would draft. If my subscribers at 4for4, want to go for the younger Chase, it's a 2-3 situation. They shouldn't use my rankings as complete gospel. But downgrading him some, he still had that breathing room ahead of Chase right now, especially with what's going on with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, which kind of leads me to another, to the next topic, and that is Joe Burrow and his calf strain. Several weeks is the phrase that we got, and we're not going to get a whole lot of definition from that, for the next few weeks as well, unfortunately. And I took Burrow in the Scott Fishbowl. Obviously, I was wearing the Burrow jersey. I telegraphed my pick at 1.6 well in advance of when it happened. But yeah, it's like, what do you do with Burrow and what do you do with Chase and Higgins and everybody else in that offense? Because we aren't going to know, if he misses 2 games, then obviously it has to be at least somewhat of a discount for all these guys.
Yeah, you're expecting your quarterbacks to play almost every game. So if you start to throw in a missed game there into the projections, it does downgrade them. I had him at 4, after the big 3. I actually had him ahead of Lamar Jackson. I think that's probably in the minority there prior to this injury, and then with the injury, downgrade the passing game a little bit, downgrade my expected games played for him, and he dropped down to 5. He's still ahead of Justin Fields and Justin Herbert as well, but a little bit concerned now about the calf. It's just, again, there's still a lot of time for him to get out there, and I don't know about you, Jeff, but when these injuries happen, I don't immediately react, or try not to immediately overreact.
Right.
And really start moving guys flying around. I'd like to, there's a lot of information that comes out in the 2 or 3 days after these injuries are announced. Beat reporters start writing stories, and we start getting some more detail on this stuff. And there's no reason to panic and start moving guys 4 or 5 spots, with injuries like this far away from the season.
Yeah, to that point, I do a set of separate like PPR ranks. Man, we have projections ranks by multiple people on the site at RotoWire, but I do my own, and they come up every Wednesday. And I make a point of not doing them until Wednesday because I want to let things settle in a little bit there. So yeah, I'm going to be a little bit behind the ball a little bit on Cooper Kupp today, and then I'll have to adjust accordingly. But look at Alexander Madison. Leaves practice last night, and we're like, oh no. And then he practiced today. Okay, I guess it's fine. And you see that all the time. To your point. So yeah, I probably have Burrow now in that Herbert tier, maybe even with Fields and Trevor Lawrence, or at least the gap has narrowed there. It's now a tier as opposed to a gap. And that's kind of more what I'm looking at there.
Yeah, I think I would have had prior to this injury, you have your top 3, which I think have some distance.
Right.
Lamar Jackson has that sort of upside to be QB1 overall. And Joe Burrow, I don't know that he does. Maybe if everything broke his way, he'd have overall QB1 upside. But I had him ahead because I think he's a little more consistent, probably a higher floor than Lamar Jackson. And then, so I would probably put Jackson, Burrow, and Fields in a tier right now with Herbert and Lawrence slightly below.
Yeah, that makes sense. And let's face it, Jackson's not exactly a paragon of health either. So between the two, we can find many reasons. We don't have to squint to find reasons to shy away if you want to, but the next couple of weeks will be pretty telling in that respect. I need to get your reaction on from the news out of Colts camp with Jonathan Taylor. It seems like this is becoming kind of a nuclear situation.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear your take as well. Immediately after this, we've got a bus meeting. We've got a trade request that apparently happened a week ago. We have a back injury, which I believe Jonathan Taylor denied on Twitter, saying that he did not have a back injury, and a trade request that's going to be denied, apparently. And I don't know that he has a whole lot of leverage here. If he doesn't play, I think he's just stuck on the contract another year. So he's just disgruntled. So I think he ends up showing up and playing, but I don't love him enough to have him ahead of Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley in the situation. Barkley's situation has cleared up considerably. He's agreed to the higher contract for the 1 year and seems relatively happy now. So Taylor moved below those guys for me, and he's at 8.5 PPR. He's right there with Ramondre Stevenson and Jahmyr Gibbs for me. That, I guess that's the 3rd tier of maybe the 4th tier of running backs there that you might get around the 2-3 turn.
Yeah, initially I had him right there with Barkley at the tail end of the first round, and now I don't even know if I'm going to take him in the 2nd round. I'd rather not. I'd rather not be forced to. I'll take Nick Chubb before him. I'll take Pollard ahead of him. I'll go wide receiver or quarterback if Allen or Hurts or Waddle are available there too, I think. And Henry too. I think I would take Henry. Before I probably had Henry below Taylor, but now I definitely won't. And to that point in the NFFC, seen the last couple of days, previously Taylor's max pick was 26. It's now 31. So you're starting to see some negative movement there.
Yeah, I was sitting there at the 212 spot in the Pros versus Joes draft on Sunday, and Taylor was sliding, and I was, it was 210. He was still on the board. So I was looking up the latest news, trying to see, do I want to take a risk on him at 212? And unfortunately, I think for my decision-making and my ulcers and all that he got taken before I had to make that call. But he's certainly sliding now into that early 3rd. And I'm looking at my rankings, he's 30 points behind in the projections, PPR behind Barkley for me. So he's right there with Stevenson, and Jahmyr Gibbs is actually 1 point ahead of him in PPR.
Wow. And that's definitely a drop. And that's definitely putting him into the third round in many drafts there. Yeah, he's exactly the type of player I don't want to have to make that decision. I don't want someone else to make the decision for me, which, it's kind of a chicken little approach for me, but nonetheless, first 3 rounds for me are all about, I don't want to have the warts. I mean, I understand there's a ceiling. There's a 1.1 ceiling with Jonathan Taylor, but there's also a much lower floor than there used to be. And we saw it last year. We see some of the things there this year. Digging a little lower in drafts, J.K. Dobbins still not practicing, indefinite point of return. I was kind of gung ho on Dobbins in April. In March after the end of the season when he looked pretty good at the end of the year. Clearly, Baltimore's best back. Was confused why they didn't use him more against my Bengals in the playoff game, and then misses OTAs, misses minicamp. Now on the PUP list. Frankly, I'm really surprised that it went this way, and I am very wary of drafting him now.
Yeah, and I don't have the insider info. I don't think it's really an injury issue with him. I mean, seemed like he was fully healthy at the end of last year. His final 5 games, including the playoff game, he had 505 total yards, 2 touchdowns on 75 total touches, 6.56 yards per carry in that span. That's from my article that we're teasing. And so, I thought he'd come in with full health now, a full year removed from that, from that injury. So it sounds to me like there's some sort of contract issue going on, and he's disgruntled. And a lot of these running backs are, looking at their future and realizing that they aren't going to make as much money as they thought they were going to. And, but, again, I don't know how much leverage he has, and, I would assume that he's going to play, but he's been kind of lower in my rankings, as kind of a shy away player for the last couple of years. The one thing that could be very interesting with him if he gets back into the fold is the receptions. They just haven't used their, running backs in Baltimore as pass catchers. And I think that's, if we saw reports earlier from the summer that Todd Monken really has prioritized running backs in the passing game. And that would be a big boon for him if he's able to get back and get back into the fold.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people are excited about that hire. And there's still got to be, there's a limited number of passes that can go around, but you would figure that, the running backs would benefit from that just a little bit more. I am kind of curious to see how that goes. Lamar said he's going to throw for 5,000 yards. I think he may have scaled that back at some point in time, but having never eclipsed 4,000, we'll see what happens there. But they do intend for him to run a little less frequently and for him to throw more often. It's just a question of apportionment and the degree to how much that changes.
Yeah, and with those running quarterbacks, you don't really want to hear that. The rushing is more valuable than the passing for them. But if they are able to be really effective with their pass attempts, then they can make up a lot of those fantasy points, especially if they pick up the pace and play faster. Because then if you throw that in plus the passing, then they can make up all those rushing yards, the loss of rushing yards.
There's a report from Ian Rappaport today stating that Alvin Kamara is almost certainly going to be suspended by the NFL. That doesn't change anything. We've known this for a very long time. I got to imagine you're the same way as I am, that you've had a possible suspension banked into your rankings already.
Yes, and I think we've seen it in ADP as well. He's going RB29 over at Underdog. The legal situation is, as I understand it, completely behind him, but the suspension is not. The fact that he, pled to a minor misdemeanor or whatever it was, doesn't change the fact that he's still in trouble with the league. And I believe Rappaport threw out 2 to 6 games. I've been assuming 4 games, and he's at RB29, he's a really interesting player that you can nab at the 7-8 turn or 7th, 8th round in some of these drafts, and you can get him as your RB3, and you don't even necessarily need him until maybe that suspension's over. Depending on who your other running backs are, you don't have a bye for your top 2 running backs in the first 4 or 5 weeks. You might be able to just add Kamara to your your backfield depth, and all of a sudden have him for the rest of the season. And he's he was like RB19, I think, last year on a PPR per game basis. But, we know he's got top 12 upside when things are really cooking. I'm looking at him as like a mid-range RB2 when he's healthy and playing.
Yeah, I'm closer to the RB3 range because I also, age, usage patterns, and all that. The fact that they went and got Jamal Williams, they drafted Kendre Miller. I think that the usage will be lower. I wanted them to throw the ball to him more last year, and maybe it was the quarterback situation. Maybe Derek Carr will do a better job of that. Taysom Hill still exists, much to our consternation. But, those are the things that have kind of like prevented me from going any higher than that. This report doesn't change that, though. In fact, it might, if it does lower Kamara's price, to your point, I think I might end up with him a little bit more than I would have otherwise.
Yeah, it's an interesting group. This is an interesting year in general with these running backs. You get some really compelling players going really late. I mean, James Conner, pick 80, Rachaad White, pick 82, and this is underdog where they're really, really wide receiver heavy. So if you're listening to this and you're just in a home league, you probably have to pull the trigger a little bit earlier on these guys. But Javonte Williams, pick 83, Isaiah Pacheco, who really was good down the stretch, pick 87, 88, Kamara, James Cook, we're getting the steady drumbeat on James Cook. So just a lot of guys in this range. Rashaad Penny, Dalvin Cook, who's free agent. These are some really compelling RB3s, and there's more talent here in the RB3 ranks that I can remember.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think you brought up another good point, and that is you talked about, knowing the underdog range. Well, that it might be different from your home league, which might be different from the NFFC. We kind of look things in a prism to the leagues we play in the more often than not. And it's really tough to kind of give that perspective for the various types of leagues that are out there. It's our job, but you get used to one sort of thing, and then you play in a Yahoo league where they only have 2 wide receivers and it's a half point PPR. All of a sudden, that prism that we've been looking at is a lot different.
Yeah, rule number 1 is know your scoring system.
Right.
And if you can also, depends on your league too, and how competitive your league is, how sharp your league mates are. But ADP can be really helpful too. If you're looking at that draft room and that so and so has a really high ADP or a low ADP. Let's say they have a low ADP and you want them, you can maybe wait an extra round before you have to pull the trigger on them, because they're probably going to be there when it's your time to pick.
100%. Calvin Ridley was limited with a toe issue. Turns out it's a cleat issue, that he was basically wearing the wrong cleats. Now, still, the toe remains aggravated, but still, it seems like this is something that should go away. I saw some commentary that you might get some Michael Thomas vibes off of this here, that you clear one injury only to have another. I don't think we're at that point here with Ridley yet, but it's always something to watch for here.
Yeah, Ridley, I'm a big fan of his game. I know he's a great route runner from all of Matt Harmon's reception perception work over there, and really big fan of his game. But it worries me a little bit having this much time off of football. We saw Deshaun Watson really have trouble shaking off the rust last year at quarterback. It's a little bit different at receiver. He has reportedly looked great in camp and everything. So I'm just slightly low on him, and I'm not pulling the trigger on receivers in that 3rd round if say a Mark Andrews is available. I'm waiting to the 4th round and maybe trying to target a Terry McLaurin. So I'm not getting a whole lot of Ridley right now, but he has a ton of talent. And if this drumbeat of positive reports and he can get over this toe issue continue, then maybe he's moving up the rankings a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this kind of slows the roll a little bit because he was steadily climbing, but prior to that. So I think that's a good point. And you did, by the way, in Fishbowl, you also avoided the 3rd round wide receiver. You went with, I think, Hawkinson in that draft. So you kind of practice what you preach as far as that goes.
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of buyer's remorse on that. I actually took Hawkinson at the end of the 2nd round. I wanted to lock up a stud tight end, and the running backs that I saw at the end of the 3rd round, I thought Breece Hall has as much upside as Nick Chubb, and I think he does, but Nick Chubb has a way higher floor right now.
For sure.
Hall still on pup. And I probably should have reversed those picks if I could have done it. But I guess I wouldn't have gotten Hawkinson in the 3rd. I was told by the league mates that wasn't going to happen.
That's true.
I got my guy.
And to be clear, it's tight end boosted scoring in the Scott Fishbowl.
Yeah,
again,
sure.
Know your league, as we always say. This podcast and all of RotoWire's podcasts are on the Blue Wire Network. We thank them for hosting us, and we do so by playing their ads right now. Thank you for your indulgence as far as that goes. Before we get into the 99 stats observations, I asked you offline if you have a favorite go-to stat for a quarterback, for a running back, for a pass catcher. Help us filter out some of the noise. When you're looking up a player, when you're doing your player profiles, you're doing your rankings, What's one of your go-to stats for quarterbacks?
Yeah. So, for quarterbacks, I will look over at PFF and look at their adjusted completion percentage. I think yards per attempt is a basic stat, but it's a helpful one. I have a whole rookie quarterback model that I use to get a starting point for rookies coming in off of their last season in college. So I use their last season stats in college. That drives a starting point for me. It's pretty good, but the one that really it does a really good job of projecting is rushing yards, expected rushing yards. Got the highest R squared in the projection. So that helps me with players like Sam Howell, who's not really a rookie, but starting this year for the first time, Anthony Richardson, etc. And I would say deep ball accuracy is important as well. Adjusted completion percentage, passing grade, those types of things. Trying to figure out like if Aaron Rodgers has really lost it. He had the 11th highest passing grade at PFF last year. He probably, didn't score as many fantasy points as we expected because of the receiver situation there in Green Bay. It wasn't so much a huge drop off in his ability.
Right. Every time he does throw it downfield, it seems like he can still drop it on a dime. It seemed like, though, at least, and I know this isn't the first time someone said this, that he chose not to at times. Maybe he lost confidence in the receivers. Maybe he was there was a pass rush situation, so he's checking down sooner rather than later. We'll see with the Jets. He's going to have plenty of targets that he should trust. We'll see about that rebuild offensive line. Everything that all the players that were hurt last year for the Jets, they have their O-line issues as well.
Yeah, the Jets it's certainly interesting. He's got a much better and more experienced receiving core this year than he did last year. I'm just getting and this whole thing with Hard Knocks as well. The talk of the super team. I'm just getting expectations are getting set really, really high, and that they would be better off if they were kind of flying under the radar as opposed to, we're going to be awesome. Everybody talk about how awesome we're going to be heading into the season. And so I'm really interested to see. It's going to be painful watching Rodgers in a Jets uniform, but I'm really interested to see Hard Knocks when it comes out.
Are you a Packers guy?
Yeah, I grew up in Wisconsin, outside of Milwaukee, and a lifelong. I was a Packer fan back in the Lynn Dickey days. Eddie the Ivory.
Very good.
Yeah.
You remember the Magic Man before Favre and all that. I used to live I lived in Chicago for 10 years, and I wasn't a Bears fan though. I'm a Bengals fan, as you know. But so being in an NFL city where you have partisan fans, and you're not a fan of that team, it's kind of fun sometimes because you see the highs and lows and all that goes. And there were plenty of both in Chicago during those times too.
Yeah, I actually remember being at the main Chicago train station, and we were taking a train somewhere. I can't remember where, but the Bears game had just let out and they had lost. And I saw all these miserable Bears fans coming through the station, and it was actually very enjoyable to me as a Packer fan to watch it. It's like an energy vampire just sucking in the energy of the misery of the Bears.
Feed off of it. Very good. How about the running backs? What's a go-to stat for you there that you're doing? You look at when you're evaluating a running back.
Yeah, I really like yards after contact per attempt. I think that's helpful in terms of how well do they break tackles. There's another broken tackles one there at PFR. Broken tackles per attempt, or number of attempts per broken tackle. That's a good one. Rushing grade at PFF is a good one as well. Yep. And then you're looking at some of the receiving options for them too. I mean, yards per route run for receivers is a huge one for me. It's very predictive of fantasy points, and I think it's very useful for running backs too, especially if you're talking, a pass catcher, like DeAndre Swift or somebody like that. Sure. It's good to know who's producing yards on their routes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to kind of get out of like just yards per carry. I mean, we can all see that. We need to find other things that help us, but there's a lot of other noisy stats as well. And that's the tricky part, is finding out what is predictive and what's just noise.
Yeah. The other one I would mention for running backs, and I think it's just a generally underutilized aspect of it because it's hard to quantify, is the offensive line play.
Yeah.
So Football Outsiders does a good job. They've got an adjusted line yards, which is free if you just sign up to their basic plan, which is just a free plan. And they also have adjusted sack rate. So that's how I kind of evaluate or help to evaluate. There's some other PFF stats that are good too for pass protection and stuff. But the adjusted line yards is a good one. And then every offseason, I will quantify the dollars in and out on the offensive line via free agency, so I can see which offensive line units are getting talent and which ones are losing talent. You also can throw in the draft picks if they took a lineman in the first 3 rounds of the draft, likely to start, and kind of see where the offensive line is going to be at after what we had last year for all these units. So it's also helpful for like a player like Nick Chubb to know that his offensive line is really strong, and they did quite a bit. The Steelers are another offensive line that they've added a lot of talent to that. So Najee Harris, I think, actually has some upside there, even though he's kind of a boring pick there in the 3rd or 4th round.
Yeah, I'm high on Harris as well, despite Matt Canada being the offensive coordinator there. But I do like the line play. But to your point, you could see last year when the Bucs going into the season, even going into training camp before Jensen got hurt, you could see that the offensive line was going to be a problem. And then they lose their starting center, and it just became a historically bad run blocking line.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the name of the article is "Who Invested in the Offensive Line." If you ever want to take a look at that, it's I don't know that anybody else does it that way. I go over to Spot Track and get my pivot tables going in Excel and try to sum up these ins and outs on the free agency side. I think it's super useful.
It is, and I think it's definitely worth checking out. So I'll do that. And speaking of articles, John writes an article, 99 stats you need to know. We're going to post the link here in a second, and we'll discuss some of the highlights from that. But first, got to share a quick note from our friends at Circa Sportsbook. As always, they are running a great pick'em contest and survivor contest. Get ready for more millions guaranteed. The biggest pro football contests in Vegas are back and bigger than ever with 14 million in guaranteed prizes only at Circa Sports. Enter in Nevada, play from anywhere. 2 ways to win and no rake. Play Circa Million, make 5 picks against the spread each week with 100% payback to players. Grand finale winner takes home $1 million. Last place takes home a $100,000 booby prize. With quarterly and full season payouts, $6 million is guaranteed. Also, you can join Circa Survivor to select one team each week straight up with no repeat selections. If the team loses or ties, the entry is eliminated. Each team can only be picked once in a season. Go 20-0 or be the last person standing to win it all. $8 million is guaranteed. Overall, $14 million is in guaranteed prizes. Visit circasports.com for details. Jeff Erickson, I am here with John Paulsen from 4for4 Fantasy. And John writes a great article every year. 99 stats. I think he titled it this year, 99 stats and a Mitch ain't one. And you can check it out at 4for4. I'm going to post the link here first. And we'll talk about a couple of the highlights from this article because it's a really interesting article. And I think you should check it out for yourselves. Starting off, I teased it earlier. Why should we be a little wary of Dak Prescott this year?
Yeah, so Prescott, I've kind of faded him in the rankings a little bit. Having watched Mike McCarthy for years and years and years, I know how stubborn he is. And I think Kellen Moore was a scapegoat last year with this. I mean, the offense was fine. It was quite good, actually. They ended up firing him so that McCarthy can take over the offense. And they were already pretty run heavy. And now they want to go even more run heavy. They were 26th in neutral script pass rate in 2022. So what are we doing? Like, this is not great for Prescott. I think he could still deliver low end QB one numbers, but McCarthy's kind of known for playing slow, and that might be the Aaron Rodgers factor because Aaron likes to run it all the way down to 1 second every time, but he tends to be a slower play caller. They want to establish a run, so that's good for Tony Pollard. I just don't think it's so good for Dak Prescott from a volume standpoint.
I agree. And I'm concerned too. And plus, and it's Brian Schottenheimer is his, offensive coordinator as well. And that's not exactly a name that fantasy players like to hear as the offensive coordinator if they're paying attention to those sort of things. Yeah.
Shoddy. There's a long history there of, establishing the run with the Schottenheimers.
Yeah. Exactly. So, I'm a little bit concerned about Dak, and I'm concerned. I don't know if there's enough volume to go around for the targets. Like, I'm certainly not going to draft Michael Gallup as a later round target when I think there's in his range. There's other wide receivers in that range I think have a better chance of kind of converting for a higher upside.
Yeah, I mean, I think the CeeDee Lamb's safe. I think Brandon Cooks, you can talk yourself into
Right.
into him. I think Pollard will see plenty of. We're just not going to see an uptick for those guys, and so that makes me leery of Prescott because he's going in a range with a lot of other players who are more intriguing to me, like a Daniel Jones or a Geno Smith. Just appeal to me more than Dak Prescott does this year.
Sure. And it's, you're trying to find any sort of scrambling upside. Probably not going to find it as much with Dak after all of his injuries either. They're probably going to try to make sure he does not run so much. Rashaad Penny, why should you be intrigued by him at his draft price?
Yeah, I was waiting to see what sort of reports we got out of this Philly camp. This is a crazy running back room now. I mean, Miles Sanders is gone. They signed Rashaad Penny fairly quickly, if I remember correctly. We all know that Rashaad Penny has been fantastic from just a yardage standpoint whenever he's been able to be healthy enough to play. But injuries are the big issue for him. And then DeAndre Swift became available, and they went ahead and pulled him in. But the first rep in camp went to Penny. That is saying something. That's he's coming in as a free agent, and he's first in line for carries. And to this point, I think he's the most established runner on this team in terms of talent. We've got some great numbers for him, and in 7 of 10 games where he had at least 12 carries, he posted 100 rushing yards. He averaged 7.39 yards per carry in those games. So when he's been the man, he's been very, very good. And then over the last 2 seasons, I mentioned these stats earlier, but last 2 seasons, amongst all the backs that had at least 50 carries in each season, Penny led the league in yards after contact per attempt in both 2021 and 2022. So, he's just a really solid runner. This is a great offensive line. So the big question is, can he stay healthy? If he does, I think he's going to have a big year. At the very least, I think he starts in September as the lead back for the Eagles. And, you can get him in the 8th, 9th round right now.
Yeah. And that's just the point too. It's not just that, hey, we love having him. It's just, hey, this is a guy that we can get for the price a lot better than, Swift. I don't think the volume's going to be there. I think you're going to be frustrated with Swift a little bit, especially because it's not just those 2. They've got like 5 backs that a lot of teams would like to have. To that point, I just saw a report the other day that Boston Scott's job may not be guaranteed this year, that he's going to have to fight for a roster spot.
Yeah, I mean, he's been the RB3 there, and now they lost Sanders. They brought in 2 backs, so he's just bumped down. They're not going to cut, I don't think, Gainwell to keep Boston Scott. But he's a good guy to keep as your 4th option, because of one of these. I mean, you got 2 pretty injury-prone running backs at the top of your running back room. You might want to have Boston Scott on the team somewhere.
We had a little bit of a scare with Alexander Madison, but as alluded to, he is practicing today, at least after kind of sitting out half of the practice yesterday. He's got RB1 upside, not RB1 overall, but as an RB1, he also has a little bit of risk because, he's never been at the week after week, that steady drumbeat. I mean, sometimes we see like the apprentice come in, get the starting role, and he doesn't really do what we think he doesn't necessarily jump right in. What are your expectations for Madison in this Vikings offense?
Yeah, this is giving me Michael Turner going from the Chargers to the Falcons kind of vibes. Now, I'm not expecting, Turner, I think was, I don't know, RB3 or 1 or something that year that he came over. I remember drafting him in the 4th round that year, really feeling like I was getting a steal. I mean, a really pretty talented backup getting his chance to start. And now we have this Alexander Madison. This is a fun debate on Twitter. There are people that are just like, I'm not drafting him. He's no good, has no vision. He wasn't able to get carries consistently with Dalvin Cook there, so that means he's not good. But for years and years and years, we were saying that Madison is a top priority handcuff to draft very late in drafts, because if Dalvin Cook goes out, he's going to be the guy. And he has delivered RB1 numbers when he's been the main guy. In the 14 games that he's seen at least 10 carries, he's averaged 18.1 touches, 88 yards, 0.57 touchdowns. That's about what Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones averaged as low-end RB1s last year. In 7 starts from 2020 to 2021, this is under a different coach. He averaged 23.3 touches for 118 yards, 0.72 touchdowns per game. That would have beaten out Saquon Barkley and Nick Chubb last season. So he also has a PFF rushing grade that was the 14th highest last year. So it's not like he's not some goofball that we're trying to just force touches to. So I think it's a good situation. It's a good offense. I think that, compared to years past with Mike Zimmer, the running backs aren't going to see huge workloads, but he should be able to see what Dalvin Cook saw last year, which I think was around 18 touches, and he can do plenty of damage in that. This is going to be a really good offense. They're going to score a lot of touchdowns. The defense is bad. So I think Madison is set up for, a really good season, and he's going in the 5th round right now.
If you're backing him up, if you're one to try to draft a top backup for a back, who's the backup to Madison?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, McBride, I think, is the name that seems to be rolling off most of the tongues around the league. I did see that Ty Chandler hasn't been impressive, and they've got Keeney Ngwandu. I'm not even going to try to do that last name.
That's good enough.
I'll just call him Kene or Keeney. So this is a really fluid situation behind him, but I think that just underscores the point that Madison is the guy. The rookie is McBride, so he's the new face, and Chandler hasn't been that impressive. So, read into that what you will.
Yeah. So to summarize, Alexander Madison, more Michael Turner, less Kevin Barlow is what we're going for.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's other guys. I'm going to date myself, but Lamont Jordan coming over from the Jets to the Raiders, I believe. Chester Taylor, RB2, came over to Minnesota, had a good fantasy season. So I look for these guys that, are quality backups that are now getting their chance to start, and they typically are going a round or two later than they should be in fantasy drafts.
I love how we're naming guys that like some of our listening audience probably never saw play. I was going to go Amos Zeraway next, but hey, there's always a go-to examples for that situation. Aaron Jones, you practice what you preach with this one. In your article, you say he's going criminally low, and then you took him in Scott Fishbowl. Yeah,
I think he's a really great value. If anything, the Packers are going to be more run heavy this year, and they're going to play faster. As I mentioned earlier, Aaron Rodgers is one of the slowest playing quarterbacks in terms of draining the play clock. So they should see more plays. With Jordan Love now a quarterback, I think Matt LaFleur will probably focus on the run. They have a good offensive line there as well. Aaron Jones should benefit from that. If Jordan Love is decent, then this offense might be better than it was last year, and that was with Rodgers. I mean, people are saying, "Oh, they're gonna tank without Rodgers," but they were bad, mediocre, I guess, last year. So if we could be mediocre again, and he's the RB9 last year, then why is he going RB16 or RB17 or whatever he is right now? Because he's, 7th in yards after contact per attempt last year, 15th in broken tackles, 3rd in rushing grade. He's the 5th most receptions, 6th most receiving yards, and the 2nd most receiving touchdowns among running backs in the last 2 seasons. So he's just been, really solid. He's 28 years old still, and he's the centerpiece of this offense this year.
One of the bigger frustrations I had last year was knowing that Aaron Jones, who is very good in the red zone, wasn't getting carries, wasn't getting those reps, and A.J. Dillon, who is terrible in the red zone, was getting those reps.
Yeah, that's a weird deal because it's just a size thing, right? Because Aaron Jones, if you watch them play, Aaron Jones is the better talent in terms of making people miss. And if you look at their 40 times, Dillon's actually a little faster than Jones, which you wouldn't think that either with his quadzilla. He looks kind of slow, but he's not. So we'll see what they do this year. I think they're going to want to have Jones in there. He does get some touchdowns regardless. It's just maybe not coming on those goal line carries. They probably want to save his body a little bit from taking those types of hits.
Yeah, something Rondane there, but we'll move on from that one there. Before we break down a couple of guys on your Scott Fishbowl team and a couple other guys from your article, quick other promotional note here. Our friends at Fantrax are also a sponsor of the podcast. For you fantasy football players and fans out there, is there something you wish your fantasy league had or features that are missing from your current leagues? Bonus scoring, custom schedules or playoffs, deeper team settings? Well, look no further because we have you covered with our friends at Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Create or join a fantasy football commissioner league, invite your friends, and dominate your draft this season. Fantrax is the top fantasy football platform in the industry for dynasty leagues. Coming from another service? Not a problem. Fantrax can easily import any of your current leagues and rosters and customize if needed. Ever have a trade go wrong or make a mistake in dropping a player? Fantrax commissioner tools allow you to undo any move with one simple click. If there is anything lacking in your current fantasy league manager, Fantrax likely has it. Fantrax is running a special promotion you don't want to miss. Sign up for free at fantrax.com/rotowire today to enter for your chance to win tickets to any regular season NFL game for you and your entire league, plus $6,000 in spending cash. That's right, tickets for your entire league. Simply create a new league or bring over your existing leagues for more chances to win. Simply go to fantrax.com/rotowire and sign up today. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. Jeff Erickson. I'm here with John Paulsen from 4for4 Fantasy. John, in any game that's got an overall contest, be it underdog or Scott Fishbowl in FFC or FFPC, stacking is always considered a good strategy. And it's the trick is trying to find a unique stack or that's attainable, still has some upside. And one that I don't think a lot of people talk about is the Guardians. And I know you are relatively optimistic on Sam Howell and certainly optimistic on Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, I think we're sleeping on this offense a little bit as an industry. And I think everybody's just worried about Sam Howell not being the real deal, 5th round pick. But he was really good. Second to last season. I don't know if it was his junior season or if it was sophomore season, but you're really good with NFL talent around him. He struggled a little bit the following year, but did decent, ran the ball a ton. You look at his receiving core, Terry McLaurin, you mentioned him, Jahan Dotson, who just, got dinged up last year, but when he was playing, he was really effective, had some big games. They have Curtis Samuel as their number 3, really good route runner, really talented player as well. Logan Thomas, if he can stay healthy, is a really intriguing tight end, 2 type. I guess he's, doing pretty well in camp, or he's going to be, the tight end's going to be featured in that offense.
Right.
Antonio Gibson, pass catching running back as well. So I think this is, and how good is this defense going to be? They might be okay, but there should be some points scored against them, and they're going to have to push the ball downfield, throw the ball more than maybe they'd like. And I think that leads to a lot of fantasy points. This is a very intriguing stack because if you can get McLaurin, it's really easy to get Howell.
Yep.
And it's not too hard to get Dotson, and it's super simple to get Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, it's easy to get Thomas. Even Gibson's not that hard to get. It's all around. I think I said Guardians, by the way, instead of Commanders, but that was a little.
I knew what you meant. I knew what you meant.
I've been taught. When you do baseball trade line day one day and then you do football the next, it's all over the place. When you're trying to think of rename teams, but I was so annoyed with you when you took Hal because that was like the perfect third quarterback to get in the Fishbowl League. You got him, I think, in the 10th round, 9th or 10th round.
9th round, yeah.
9th round. And it's like, I waited one round too late to try to get that third quarterback because he's easily got QB2 upside and you're getting a QB3 price for him. And in a super flex league, that's super important.
Yeah, you sit there in these leagues and these super flex leagues, and I do think the quarterback position is very important. So I was, planning to start with at least one. I did see the ADP and saw guys like Geno and Daniel Jones were slipping to the 4th round, and I ended up with Daniel Jones there. They both were available there for me at 4-3. And you're watching some of these other drafters, and they're just ignoring the quarterback position. And part of me definitely wants to stick it to them if they were wanting. This is not you. You took Burrow and Dak Prescott, so you went pretty hard on the quarterbacks at the start. But some other drafters, I want to, you're not going to get Howell. You're not going to get my favorite deep sleeper if you haven't taken by the 9th round, man. I'm going to take him. I think it was one of those deals where I had it on a post-it. I said Sam Howell in the 9th, no matter what. So I went ahead and drafted him there.
Well, there you go. And the thing is, he got thrown in. He got thrown to the Wolves in Week 18 against the Cowboys, a really tough defense. And it turned out, the Commanders didn't even realize the game mattered, or at least Ron Rivera didn't. I mean, Ron Rivera is is like the one thing that has me worried about the whole Commanders offense. Actually, he's tugboat Ron. He's not riverboat Ron, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, the talent is certainly there. Did you see the quote from Gibson today? He's like, I wish I stayed as a wide receiver instead. Cause he's like, I could be a running back. It could be a receiver. He's a receiver a lot at Memphis. And sure, of course, when you see what receivers are getting paid versus what running backs are getting paid. Yeah, I'd rather be a receiver too.
Yeah. I think, the running back, there should be some sort of reset with the pass catching running back. compared to just a traditional running back that doesn't
Yep.
catch many balls. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a difference there in terms of what they're worth, value, real world value, et cetera. But I watched that every throw before I decided to really get on the Sam Howell train. I sat down and used the NFL subscription that we have to watch every throw that Sam Howell had in that game. And he was fairly impressive. I mean, he obviously can really run the ball. He ran the ball 35 yards, a touchdown there. So you got 9.5 fantasy points right there. And, I think he was 11 of 18. They didn't throw the ball a whole lot, but that was because they led most of the game. He threw a great pass, deep ball to Terry McLaurin, some other good passes. And then he did have a bad interception in the end zone, but I guess Ron Rivera was impressed with how he came to the sideline, took ownership of it, and tried to figure out what he did wrong.
Yep.
So he's just a really athletic, sleeper athletic type player who has that. To me, I call him arbitrage for Anthony Richardson. So he's a guy you can have. I mean, Richardson went in the 3rd round in our draft. You can get him, in super flex leagues, 9th, 10th round. But he has that rushing upside that we're looking for, and he's got a really good receiving core. And if he's even a decent passer, he's a big time threat for a top 12 season.
Yeah, and his collegiate career is interesting. They had a lot of talent in North Carolina, but they all left. Like a lot of his skill position players left the year before him, and it was basically he was kind of on his own that last year, and he still put up credible numbers. But you saw his draft stock go down, and it was kind of like, okay, well, who did he have to play with? And and it's hard, especially at the college level. Sometimes adjusting on the fly like that's pretty tough.
Yeah, and he went from 300, 300 yards rushing the previous season to 800. So obviously the mindset and the offense changed to where we're going to feature him as a runner. And, for the coaching staff to recognize that, obviously he's got that athletic ability that, maybe he wasn't showing the previous year, but, it showed up in week 18.
It absolutely did. So I do like him. I like him, and I like his teammates as late round values. And like we said, very gettable. And you're trying to look for especially you're playing around. You're doing volume with a lot of like underdog contests. That's a stack you can easily get, and it maybe separates you a little bit there. Breece Hall, you mentioned that there's a little remorse there, buyer's remorse on him because of the pup list and because of the cost of who you cost to get that you didn't get Nick Chubb instead. He has the 1.1 upside. He has that potential, but I always try to avoid injury optimism at the draft table, especially with ACLs and running backs. And so he's a tricky guy to value this year.
Yeah. And I was given from what I've read on the ACL recovery, it really helps if you're young, which he is. It really helps if you're really athletic, which he is. So I'm still optimistic. This could all work out for me. But I'm looking at it now. I did get sniped on Tony Pollard, one pick before.
Ooh.
So that was who I really wanted there. I thought maybe I could get him, and then that would have made the whole Chubb thing, not so bad. And then I just went with Hall. I thought the upside in this sort of tournament, having him towards the end of the year, if I could make the playoffs, would be really nice. I passed on Ramondre Stevenson for him. I don't know if I would do that now. We have a little bit more information. Now we have Dalvin Cook coming in for meeting. Like, this was not all happening when we were drafting Scott Fishbowl. I guess there was some rumors that the Jets might be interested in Dalvin, but nothing had happened yet, and still nothing has happened. So what I think is happening with Dalvin is he's going and visiting, and then they get to the contract and he's like, oh yeah, but
I thought I was worth more than that. And
yeah,
like every other running back, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think he said the chances were pretty high that he's going to sign with the Jets, but they haven't signed. And his best bet is really to go to Miami and see if he can lock down the RB1 job there and have a big year, maybe do a 1-year deal, and then try to get into the free agent market next year. But with Hall, I'm still optimistic. Things haven't gone as great because from what we've heard all offseason, you're comparing Javonte Williams to Breece Hall. I thought that Hall was ahead of Javonte, and it turns out the opposite is true. Or it might just be how the teams are deciding to handle Hall versus Javonte. Like the Broncos might be a little bit more liberal with what they're doing with him, and he had 2 other ligaments that were torn, while Hall's was very simple. It was just the ACL. So I'm still optimistic. I definitely don't want Dalvin to sign there, but I wouldn't mind if a Zeke or a Leonard Fournette signed there if they were trying to add a veteran back.
Yeah, I'd actually worry more about Fournette than I would Zeke at this point in time, but maybe I'm just being a little extra jaded. But I think, or maybe extra cautious. I don't know. I was worried about Fournette signing in New England, and that never seemed to happen either. It's taken its time for these guys to resolve.
Yeah, and a guy that I'd be most worried about is Kareem Hunt, because he's, I think, more in. And I drafted him, and I raised some eyebrows. I drafted him in the 6th round, Scott Fishbowl, and maybe I reached on him a little bit, but I felt like I looked at the board and I was like, I think he's the most talented running back out there. He's going to land somewhere, and wherever he does, he's really going to upset the apple cart because he's a dual threat. I mean, he can catch the ball. He's not just a pass catcher though; he can run the ball. We saw that Kansas City. So that's the player that if he lands somewhere, you really have to look at the running back room, the running back touches, and really kind of shake things up.
So speaking of Hunt and where he left behind in Cleveland, are you big on Jerome Ford taking over some of the pass catching duties there?
I would say some, but the running back coach there is speaking so highly of Nick Chubb and his upside as a receiver. I believe earlier in the year, he just threw out like, oh, Chubb could have 1,000 yards receiving. Now that's just ridiculous. But I mean, I could not fathom that happening given Chubb's career so far and how they run that offense. But the fact that he's even willing to say that, maybe 400 yards is, 500 yards is within, his range of outcomes. And all of a sudden you're adding that to his mega workload as a runner. So I do think Ford is involved, but I don't think it's as much as Hunt was. And Ford has that huge, injury upside if something were to happen to Chubb. I call those attrition plays. So if there's an injury there, Ford is a worthy draft pick because he's going to be vaulted into RB2 land.
Is it possible we're undervaluing Chubb, that he could be like RB3 overall, RB2?
That's where I have him ranked. I have him at RB3. So he's right behind Eckler and McCaffrey for me. I just think he has that combination of really high floor and RB1 overall upside if he gets his 40, 50 catches.
No one doubts his ability as a runner, that's for sure.
No.
And Cleveland is as stable as they've been in a long time overall. Very drama-free offseason. And so it could be, and we know they have a great run blocking line.
Yes.
Having Watson at the start of the season should be beneficial. This could be a really monster season for him, and he's already good. Now it's a question of if that usage goes like we're talking about, wow, that could be crazy good.
Yeah, somebody asked on Twitter about why his numbers tanked with Deshaun Watson once he came in, and I went to go look at it again using PFR's or actually StatHead's play calculator that they have, and it was interesting to see they totally changed their how they operated inside the 10-yard line. They went from week 1 to week 12. They had 19 pass attempts, 32 rush attempts. So that's with Jacoby Brissett. Chubb got 1.54 touches per game inside the 10. Then from week 13 to week 18, 13 pass attempts, 6 rush attempts. So they totally flipped to being pass heavy inside the 10. And Watson was pretty bad. But Chubb only got 0.5 touches per game inside the 10. So I think that explains Chubb's touchdowns dropping with Watson. So the question is, number one, is Watson better? Do we have more drives into the red zone? Is the offense more efficient? Are there more touchdown opportunities total? And the other is like, does Stefanski look at this and go, I went way too pass heavy inside the 10. I just got to give it to Chubb and let him do his work.
Right. And it's partially a sample size thing. There weren't that many red zone attempts to begin with there. So that's part of the problem. Watson was straight up terrible. I mean, there were a couple of games where they barely got near to the red zone, and like the Washington game, it was a couple of big plays. Besides sandwiching just like this steady stream of ineptness on offense. It was a very strange game. If you recall, there's those 2 big plays to Cooper. I think there was a pick 6 involved. And otherwise it was not a good game at all. So that's one of the things I kind of want to see them in like normal weather. They played like these extreme cold games too. It's a very weird cap to the season for the Browns.
Well, let me ask you about that. You mentioned Deshaun Watson's play. Like, how worried are you about how he did last year? Is he going to get back to his top 5 ways? I see him going off the board QB9. He went off the board QB9 in our draft and Scott Fishbowl. right after Trevor Lawrence, like 3 picks after. So I have him, 5 or 6 spots lower than that. I just have him kind of in that group of QB2s that are, the Tuas, the Geno, right, the Daniel Jones, the Aaron Rodgers, those types of guys. I don't see, I guess the upside is there, but last year worries me.
Understandably. I think there's, and we can make reasons for it, excuses for it. I think the real answer is I don't know. It's a faith-based decision here, really. Because we definitely didn't see it, but we saw the Houston version of him from a year and a half ago, and we think, okay, well, maybe. That's thing. I think rust explains a lot of it, but I don't know. It could be just an age gap too. That does happen sometimes. Is he going to run more? Is that mobility going to be back? Because that opens up a lot of doors. But we'll have to see it. He's going to be one of those fulcrum players, I think, this year. If he could be one of those guys that could win a league for you, or he could destroy the value of his teammates again. Because I think he was a direct cause to a lot of the people. I think it's because the offense was so bad that Chubb's overall numbers went down. It's because just the offense was so bad. And then if the passing game can't hurt you, okay, well, let's just try to make Chubb beat. Let's not let Chubb beat us.
Yeah, they were legitimately better with Brissett.
Yeah,
and I don't think anybody on the staff would argue that. But Watson is their franchise quarterback now, so they're going to go with him.
And they paid a heavy price for him, so they're going to give it all the chances they can.
Yeah, I think I kind of cursed my team last year. I drafted Watson late, and I was expecting a big push towards the end of the season, and he was just terrible. So maybe I'm a little bit jaded about Deshaun Watson.
Understandable. You saw it with your own eyes. It was legitimately terrible. So I get it there. Before we let you go, I know 4for4 has a deal with Sleeper right now. You were tweeting about that before the podcast today. Can you tell everybody about that?
Yeah, it's our new partner we announced today. They have a new game over there. It's called the Picks game. So they're, I think they're getting into the prize picks type thing, the pick'em type stuff. And if you deposit $20, even if you're a sleeper, already having a sleeper account, it doesn't matter. If you haven't yet deposited in their picks game, you can, for just $20, you can get a free 4for4 Pro subscription. And they do match sleeper matches up to $100. They'll do 100%. So if you want to, put in 100, get $100 back, and then you get a free subscription over at 4for4. So that's a big partnership for us.
Very cool. Well, John, I had a great time meeting you at Fishbowl, and a greater time just talking with you now too, talking a lot of football. Thanks for coming on board, and good luck this season.
Thanks, Jeff. Great to be on. Thanks for having me.
You bet. John Paulsen, everybody, at 4for4_John on Twitter. Of course, he's at 4for4. Check out what they have to offer. And thanks again for listening. Coming up, we'll have our regular slew of podcasts for the rest of this week. Good luck in your leagues. Take care.